Okay, so point number one, Windsor and Brian are looking for injunctive relief on me showing up or speaking about their organization. I've made a number of truthful comments. I showed up there one time, knocked on the door, tried to speak to them. So point number two talks about how I was fired from Windsor. I was fired from Windsor because I asked them to pay for licensing as a vendor told us we needed to do. They were not willing to pay for that licensing. It then goes on to talk about how I was fired from SSAB. I brought up ethical and safety concerns at SSAB along with cybersecurity concerns. I brought these to the safety team. SSAB paid me severance and let me go because they didn't want to address those items. It talks about showing up to Windsor. I showed up to Windsor because I thought Windsor, as a cybersecurity company in the area, should do an assessment for SSAB to help them understand where they were lacking. It claims I attempted to forcibly enter the building. That's absolutely false. I went to their front door and I tried to open it. This is a door that was unlocked during the time that I was working there, and they actually informed me that they surprise locked it the day I was showing up. So it looks like that was by design or something. It claims I picked up a rock in a threatening manner to throw it at the office window. That's absolutely false. I would never do that. I may have tried to wave in a window to get somebody's attention with the door being locked, but that's nothing more than confusion there. It talks about a number of false defamatory and inflammatory posts. Everything I've said's been true. And then unsolicited and harassing emails to Windsor employees, clients, and third parties, including military personnel. I've not done anything that isn't true. Anything that I did was absolutely to help get maybe the DoD or the Arsenal to look into regulations that Windsor knew they were violating. And then false accusations of criminal conduct, fraud, and sexual misconduct against Brian. Brian gave me titty twisters constantly at Ryan and Associates until the point where he had to get reprimanded and was told not to. This happened all the time. This continued through my time at Windsor. He committed fraud in purchasing licensing. I can go into those details. Specifically, the first one I saw was how he explained the ownership of RS Industries, Ryan and Associates, and all those organizations with the Autodesk licensing that he decided to purchase under Ryan and Associates for all of those organizations. And from there, point number three claims that I've continued to escalate my conduct. It claims that there's a documented history of erratic, threatening conduct, and I've created an immediate and ongoing threat of irreparable harm to the plaintiff's safety, business reputation, operations, necessitating emergency injunctive relief. I don't see any way that this is true. I've brought up concerns of regulation violations to the community and the United States government. I brought up concerns about the fraud they were committing to those out there. And I don't know if the truth harms their reputation, I don't know that that's my fault. And beyond, they say that I should only contact them through counsel, which at this point I haven't been able to come up with a lawyer, so I intend on representing myself. So I'm contacting them exactly how they've asked to be contacted. Points 4 through 6 appear to just be items identifying parties in the lawsuit. Point 7 goes into the venue where this is occurring or needs to occur, the case. I believe, as my speech has been all occurring down here in North Carolina, that should be North Carolina. They ask that things are done in Scott County. I don't know why we would do it there, but... Point 9 talks about how I was terminated from Windsor. That is a true statement. I was a technical consultant there, and I previously had worked at Ryan and Associates, where I first saw Brian committing fraud. Point 10 talks about that same thing. And then point 11 talks about how I was committed to a mental health institution 4 or 5 times in the last year. That's a false statement. I under duress, I voluntarily signed to go in the first time, and I was allowed to leave early after they found I was fine. I was told by a nurse that I was diagnosed bipolar, but I was not told by a doctor. So as I see it, that's an invalid diagnosis, and I don't know what the truth of that is or how they have tracked it in the medical institution. The second time I went in was in Iowa. I was forced in by my parents. They let me go and told me if I wanted to chase this girl, I should, and I should use her full name. They also told me I was good to smoke weed if I wanted, but I should avoid sativa at night. I'm currently sober. I drink coffee and caffeine right now. It's a fun life. The third time I went in, I signed on my own after I walked off of a bridge and Moline decided to lock me up. I signed the paperwork under duress. I was forced drugged, and I was held down and forced drugged the first and third time I got put into the hospital. But I mean, absolutely crazy retaliation from the medical industry. They found no new findings on me or whatever, and they talked about that old diagnosis that came from a nurse. So I'm not sure what the deal is, and it's tough to navigate the world when you don't know what the truth of the medical industry, like what they've told people about you. There have been no fourth or fifth times, and I don't know where that allegation comes from, but that's a false claim from this lawyer and Brian Sproat. Point 12 talks about what they claim is some sort of threatening conduct. It talks about how I was released from jail. I was. And it talks about Windsor locking their door because of that. I guess they're free to do that. The claim says I showed up. I tried to open the door forcefully. You try and use a door handle. I didn't try and force anything beyond typical door handle usage. It claims I tried to picked up a rock to throw it through the window. That's absolutely false. I did not do that at all. There was no threatening manner. There was no even consideration of trying to break a window. I don't know why they would make that false claim. And then they claim that this created fear for the employees, which I'm pretty sure didn't happen because the allegations were false above that. Points 12 through 15, that would be. And as I have noted, my goal in showing up was to speak to them about regulations violations that we could see that SSAB was knowingly committing. And with them as a MSP, and with Brian's desire that he had expressed to me to become an MSSP, I figured they would be a good company in the area to work with SSAB to help them resolve cybersecurity concerns and issues that I had made them aware of. Point 16 talks about how I use Twitter, my Twitter handle, and claims that I have 30,000 tweets out there. That's true. This is America. We can speak here. Point 17 talks about something that I learned through Brian Sproat. So they had purchased licensing for RS Industries, where you have to own 51% of an organization to be able to purchase the licensing for them. So if you're a consultant, like a third-party consulting company, and you're buying licensing, you have to buy that under the company that actually is going to utilize the licensing. Well, we had purchased licensing under Windsor Consulting Group. And to do that legally, Windsor had to own 51% or more of those sub-organizations, or that was them committing fraud. And they're claiming that this is a false statement, so I guess I was misled on the ownership by them while I was working there. Point 18 talks about an allegation that I heard from someone. I posted, I definitely can't confirm this one and have no firm knowledge to base it on, but someone told me that Wendy Gonzalez slept with Brian Sproat at a strip club in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Beyond, I was told it was an intentional setup going after him, saying as I was asked for transparency. That's 100% true. I was at the strip club with them. I did not see any of that, and I was informed that via social media. Prior to posting that, I also reached out to people close to Brian to figure out if they knew if it was true or not, and figure out if I should post that or not. I never heard back, so truth gets spoken. I heard that. Point 19 talks about the Autodesk licensing fraud that Brian committed. So the quote that they have is, I will say whatever RS Industries, Windsor Consulting Group, Windsor Group did with licensing for Autodesk was in collusion with the representative from ImagineIt. This is 100% true. They were lying about the ownership of the RS Autodesk licensing. They had licensed a company, Keen Project Solutions, under that organization. This all originally started as licensed under Ryan and Associates, and that was done with ImagineIt. Bill Mayfield was the original third-party vendor with that organization that allowed them to sign that paperwork in that way. I don't believe he understood the ownership implications. I was in that meeting with Brian. And this always led to me being very concerned with the ownership, but not knowing what was going on because they wouldn't confirm which company owned which and how those different pieces worked out. And I don't know why those details were secretive and why someone purchasing licensing like that wasn't able to understand or get that information in the organization. They claim this falsely accused Windsor personnel of criminal collusion without reasonable basis. I was literally the guy in these meetings. There's 100% reasonable basis unless they can show they own all those organizations. That's how we were forced to buy this licensing. So, point 20 talks about employment history of Windsor employees where they worked at Illinois Casualty Company, which is a company that kind of does the math on insurance for bars. It's just an interesting implication. That's all that is. Point 21 talks about how I was uncomfortable proceeding with purchasing items as I was getting different answers from a client and from Brian and from Katie and from other people on who owned different organizations: Keen Project Solutions, Advantage Industrial Systems, Heavy Equipment Movers and Installation, Ryan and Associates, Northwest Mechanical, RS Industries, High Point Construction, Luna. I mean, all of these, I think there were 26 or something organizations that had all of their data run under Ryan and Associates and that ERP software that they used. And I don't know that that was legal. And then we changed that to Windsor Consulting Group. It was all licensed under Windsor Consulting Group, and they had all these organizations under there. But I was concerned because I didn't really believe that Windsor owned all those organizations, and they wouldn't give me clarity. Point 22 talks about how in a thread I accused Brian of sexual abuse in the workplace. I was receiving maybe daily titty twisters from him while we worked at Ryan and Associates. They were far more rare once we were at Windsor, but every time I walked past him, my nipples were guarded. That man would come after me. I don't know what his motive was exactly, but I was disgusted by his act. Point 23 addressed concerns that I had of the psychological abuse that Brian was attempting to put me through with these allegations, with claims from his company, and with other items. Point 24 addresses gun ownership and the times that I was essentially pushed into care. I don't see any false claims with that. I don't know why that's even included. And I talk about how I think words are much more powerful, especially with the truth. Point 25 addresses constitutional carry in the United States. I don't know why they're including that in a document here. Point 26 talks about how Windsor blocked me from their email systems. I had emailed them at various times leads for cybersecurity work, which I believe they were open to, as Brian was primarily a sales employee in his role. Point 27 talks about how I sent Giovanni Lee and Brian Sproat unsolicited emails about risks in United States steel mills with hypotheticals. I absolutely did this, and I am still to this day under the impression that those would be the best two sales contacts at the organization, along with Ryan Harvey. Point 28 addresses how I reached out to Windsor and the Contracts Administration Office for the Rock Island Arsenal because I had concerns about how a specific tool was being used and syncing data from the arsenal to the cloud that Windsor set up. Point 28 claims that Windsor was harmed by me telling the people at the arsenal or with military experience the truth. If you get harmed by the truth, that's on you, bud. Point 30 addresses Sproat claiming lies are being spread and some sort of mental health defamation. I don't need any of that. He asked me to not contact the employees again, but due to the defamatory nature of his comment, I've disregarded that. And if we can get a truthful comment out of him, we'll take it as necessary. I also don't know who is employed by the company. He hasn't provided me a list of employees or anything like that. So, Point 31 talks about how I've continued to communicate with them. I have forwarded messages to them. I've offered them leads on cybersecurity stuff. I don't intend any harm. Point 32 attacks me for trying to tell the truth. I don't know why that wouldn't be allowed. Point 33 is false. Point 34 is, as I see it, absolutely ridiculous. I don't know why Brian would believe a claim like that or anything along those lines. I was asked to return to SSAB to speak with Johnny, who is in their leadership, about cybersecurity regulations. I returned, and yes, I was arrested and trespassed. I literally was trying to help the United States and keep engineers at that steel mill safe after major concerns. Things have been reported to OSHA, things have been reported to CISA. Point 35 addresses how I was locked in Unity Point Health for rhabdomyolysis against my will, and then I was under duress pushed to sign into mental care, and then the SSAB retaliation where they for some reason put me on suicide watch in the jail, and they wouldn't let me make a phone call for days. Point 36 talks about a claim that there's a teleportation device in the river. I don't know why Brian would believe this or make that claim to a court. I did not try and jump off a bridge. I went to multiple bridges in an effort to bring attention to cybersecurity issues occurring and being allowed to occur by cybersecurity companies in the area. And I believe it brought significant attention to that. Point 37, as I test the AI, I see them trying to stop me as them trying to hurt people and murder people. Because as I was told after being targeted for a job by XAI, that the AI needs people that are testing the algorithm as hard as possible and putting things out there and not so much taking risks, but making it believe that you're going to take a risk to see how it retaliates on you. And that's what I believe killed my friend Austin Reed. So that's why I do this testing. Point 38 talks about how I've traveled. I don't know why travel matters. I'm living in North Carolina now. Point 39 talks about an existing bench warrant for me in Muscatine County. That is true. I was told to get out of the area for my safety. I've been followed multiple different times. I had an officer down here in North Carolina that told me he was following me. I mean, beyond that, I don't have a lot more to say. I see those charges as retaliatory. I've been in contact with the district attorney's office, and they haven't been able to offer me protection if I was to return. I was warned that my life was in danger by someone who works at John Deere on Palantir Software. I was warned that my life was in danger by a therapist that I talked to after a potential attempt on my life in early 2025. That person's becoming to be working to become a therapist, and was a good friend of mine. And I mean, there have been a lot of death threats, both in the Davenport area and down here in North Carolina. So I'm here for my safety on recommendations from others, and I'm willing to return with proper protection and guidance. Point 40 claims that I've had escalating erratic behavior. This is false. It claims I've had references to firearms. I'm an American. I live in America. I don't own any guns. I don't know why that matters. And it says I pose an ongoing and immediate threat, which I don't think I've threatened anyone. I don't know what that's coming from or why they're scared or paranoid about something. Point 41 appears to be procedural. Point 42 then repeats the false claim of me trying to forcibly open a locked door and throw a rock. I have no idea why they're making false claims to a court to defame me further. Point 43 talks about how I gave them a heads up before I tried to show up to speak to them about a work opportunity that I thought that I could see in the area. Points 44 through 50 address how they don't want me returning to their property. I had no idea they were so hostile. I didn't know they were so scared of the truth. I thought they were looking for work opportunities in the area. That's what they looked for in the past. Me as a professional services team lead for them, they had me even working on sales opportunities. So, that was a big part of the job. And I saw an opportunity for them. I tried to pass that their way. But I have now, knowing that they are so hostile and scared of that, I don't have any intention of returning. I don't think there's any threats or whatever. I've only told true things. They claim their employees will be mentally harmed. I actually could see them being mentally harmed, but I see that being from the abusive nature of the work that they're put through working at Windsor, pushed to do these illegal things, if that has continued. Aside from that, I don't see how there'd be any mental harm from this. Point 51, procedural. Point 52 claims a number of false statements. I don't believe I've made any false statements at this point. The most illegal action, I think, I believe that was when I walked in and he said he was deleting emails for a legal case to make sure there wasn't anything too concerning for Mr. Conklin. B goes over Brian's fraud and criminal collusion. He committed fraud for sure, buying that Autodesk licensing back in the day. I believe there were a number of other little items that were fraudulent. Criminal collusion, there was definitely collusion going on between a number of businesses that I can get into. Things that they told us were RS Industries, but the ownership was, they were telling me the wrong thing. I don't know what they were telling everybody else. Misconduct at a strip club. I was informed of an incident that may or may not have occurred. I prefaced that with I didn't know if it was true when I talked about it, and I gave people close to Brian a heads up that I was going to post that, and they didn't tell me it wasn't true. So false accusation, workplace sexual abuse. Yeah, Brian used to give me titty twisters all the time. He was reprimanded for that at Ryan and Associates, and once we became Windsor, I got screamed at when I emailed HR the one time, so I quit messaging HR as I learned that was not allowed. And then false allegations on fraud and deceptive business practices. I mean, I can go into detail for hours on that. They were lying to me as a professional services team lead about who owned companies and trying to get me to buy licensing in certain ways. I see that as fraudulent. It was absolutely deceptive. Point 53 is to outline upcoming statements. So we'll get 54 talks about how I've published these on social media and they are harming the business. If the truth harms your business, work better. Point 55 claims if I was to continue defamatory statements that they would suffer harm. I don't believe I've made any, so I don't know there's any continuing of those type of statements. And if there's harm for the truth, why am I being sued? Point 56 claims that if I was to continue posting false statements, there would be risk for Windsor. I don't believe they've shown any of my statements to be false. Point 57 claims that Mr. Sproat and Windsor would be likely to succeed due to numerous lies in this and no evidence showing that my statements are actually untrue. I strongly doubt that. Point 58 claims they need injunctive relief as there's potential harm. I mean, if we can't show any of the statements are untrue, and I'm willing to testify that they are absolutely true. That's my left hand. We go right, whatever, We'll swear on the Bible. I don't think we should stop John from speaking the truth. Point 59 claims that the balance of harm favors Windsor and Mr. Sproat. I believe that's completely false. He's made some comments. We'll see what we can find. And my statements have been true. Point 60 claims that the public favors the injunction. I don't know. I don't know why they want regulations covered up and fraud allowed and deceptive business practices allowed if that's the... Point 61. Point 62, they claim my conduct is harassment. I don't see that in any way. I've tried to help the company. Brian was a man I respected. I don't know what he has going on or what the problem is here. I tried to push business his direction. I've tried openly doing that online, and that is what it is. I don't believe it's been harassing at all. Point 63 explains what harassment is. I have tried to communicate with these people at different times, but I have not intended harm. My intention has been the truth and helping the United States, the DoD, the Rock Island Arsenal, and subcontractors of various businesses in the Quad City area to follow cybersecurity regulations that I learned when developing applications that helped assess CMMC and similar NIST regulations that are required by a number of these businesses, whether they're under the DoD as their governing body or they're under the Department of Energy or whoever they might be under. Point 64 claims Sproat or somebody feels terrorized or something. Terrorized, frightened, intimidated, or threatened. If the truth does that, work differently, dude. Point 65 talks about how I've implied violence. I've never. not not toward them or others. I don't understand how they're coming up with that at all. References to firearms. Iowa allows firearms. I don't know. Like, I don't know why I would not be able to speak about something like that as a United States citizen. And persistent publication of false defamatory statements. We've now identified that that's completely false. There have been a ton of false claims entered to the court here. Point 66 claims if I was to continue making harassing statements that they would suffer immediate harm. I think I'd have to start making harassing statements for that to be the case. These have been truthful statements, and beyond that, I don't know why so many false items have been entered to the court by this law firm and by Mr. Sproat and by Windsor Consulting Group. 67 talks about how there would be real risk given a pattern of harassing statements. We're yet to identify that. Point 68 claims they'd be likely to succeed. We're yet to see anywhere where they've shown that my statements have not been truthful. Point 69 claims that Windsor would suffer harm if there was not injunctive relief and I was to continue posting these statements. I'm yet to start posting statements like that online, so I don't see this as a reasonable. Point 70 claims that the balance of harm favors Windsor. I don't know why they can't handle the truth. Point 71 claims there's public interest favoring the injunction. I mean, if we're done speaking truth and we're not allowing truth to be spoken in the United States, possibly. If not, I don't see how that's in the interest of the public. There we have like their final statement where they're asking for this essentially to the court. I mean, I don't see this as at all reasonable. I think the truth should be spoken. I think if cybersecurity companies are, I don't think fraud should be allowed, I guess. That's my ultimate. Thank God, truth is the ultimate defense.